So we do this generational initiative every so often. So the last time we did this was in 2017. So as we go through this, you'll see some comparisons to the results from then, which was really interesting. And one thing that was really a standout on this one is that we did some generational work with Gen Z specifically. So those are people who are between 15 and 23. We did it 4 years ago, and then this year we recontacted the people that we originally talked to. So as at the very end of this, you'll see some of those comparisons to if it was just life stage and how things have changed and what COVID did to alter the way that people buy things, but especially with this Gen Z population. So just to ground everybody, generations at a glance, we have Gen Z, they're about 67 million, 20% of US adults. They have about 10,000 annual retail spend, and their average debt is somewhere between 12 and 192,000. And the reason that's so high is because a lot of them have student loan debt. A little bit about what defines them. They are digital natives. They've never known a time where they didn't have access to information via a smartphone in their hands or different apps and those sorts of things. So they're very used to engaging with the world in a digital manner. They are somewhat conservative. They avoid debt, and that's mostly because their parents went through the Great Recession and have always told them that debt is a bad thing. So when we talk about credit cards, it's like at first they're like, oh no, credit's bad. And then when we dig a little bit deeper, they don't really know why they think that, other than that's what their parents told them. So just something to keep in mind as we go through this. And then we have our millennials. So there are about 72 million of them. They're about 22% of US adults. They have about 9,000 in annual retail spend, and their average debt runs between 28,000 and 256,000, and that's non-mortgage and mortgage. So at this life stage, they're buying houses for the first time, so they do have that mortgage in there. They're shaped by the Great Recession. So these guys grew up during that Great Recession. So their take on finances is a little bit different than other generations. They lived through 9/11, and they just started coming on to that internet and social media age. They're a little bit less brand loyal than our other counterparts. And then we have Gen X. So they account for about 65 million, 20% of US adults. I'm a Gen Xer. And their average debt is about 32 to 259,000. Most of them have mortgages. They saw in their lifetime the rise of personal computing, Cold War and politics. They actually had dial phones way back then, you know, but they are very digitally savvy, and they have adapted to current environments, and they're pretty adaptable. A lot of times you hear people talk about Gen X as the lost generation because most companies either market to millennials or Gen Zs or the older population. So sometimes they feel a little bit lost. And then we have our boomers. So that's about 71 million of the US population, 22%. They have 8.9 annual retail spend, so a little bit less than the other generations. And their debt is also a little bit less, 24,000 to 198. As you get older, they start paying off things. So they have post-World War II optimism. They lived through the hippie movement, and they prefer in-person to digital things, although they are not to be forgotten because they are transitioning to that social media and getting much more comfortable with digital things. Maybe not as much as Gen Z, but they are definitely comfortable. So then we wanted to look at their shopping behaviors and attitudes and how they differed from generation to generation. And for younger generations, that shopping experience is as important as the product itself. And that was a big aha for us here. So let that sink in for a second. Gen Z told us, and many of the millennials, that the experience of shopping for something is as important as what they're buying themselves. So really different than Gen Xers and boomers. That experience is really important to them. So to help our partners, we have to help them make an experience that's great for these guys, in addition to having really good products. Despite being digitally savvy, younger generations prefer to shop in store for most purchases. You can see how this breaks down, but for groceries, almost everybody prefers to shop in store. COVID had a little bit of uptick with delivery services for groceries. And for some people that stuck, but for most people, they'd still rather go buy their groceries in store. Same holds true for everyday household items, accessories, and shoes, although our Gen Zers have bought some of those things online and they're pretty comfortable with that. Clothes, they still want to go into the stores and try things on and touch and feel them. Cosmetics, pet care, supplies and services. There are some subscription services for pet care that have taken off, and that is what leads some of those numbers to be a little bit higher for that prefer in line. And for bigger ticket purchases, this holds true as well. So larger home furnishings, most people would still want to go into a furniture store and look at those, sit on it, lay on it, whatever it is that they're buying. Home improvement, no worries for Lowe's and Home Depot. They're still going strong and people prefer to shop for those things in store. Smaller home furnishings, same holds true, and appliances as well. What is a little bit different, though, even most of these specialty items, they still prefer in-store, but you can see a little bit of a shift to prefer online. So some of those things people are getting more comfortable with the idea of buying online, especially like sporting and fitness equipment. I know Peloton sold a whole bunch of things online during the pandemic. The one thing that is a little bit different is electronics. So as people have adapted to a more digital world, they're getting more and more comfortable with buying those electronics online. They might buy their next Apple phone online because they've had a seamless experience with it, transitioning from one phone to the other. So that's good news for us and for our electronic partners, that there is a shift towards more buying online for them. Despite in-store shopping preference, online presence is really, really necessary because so many people research and review before purchasing. More than ever before, almost everybody that we talked to in our surveys told us that they look at word of mouth reviews and they look at online reviews. So those reviews are super, super important to them. And the other thing that's really important is that there is a marriage between the online presence and the in-store shopping experience. So while it is true that most people would like to go into a store to purchase things, they're doing all of their research online, or at least 90% of it. You can see how these numbers really pan out there for almost all the generations. They want to do all that research online. Shoppers look forward to shopping at big box and online only retailers. And part of this was COVID driven. So people wanted to get things in one place instead of having to go to many stores. So that is a shift that we're watching really closely to see if it's going to stay a trend as people get more and more used to going back out into the world again. This might shift a little bit, but for now, most people are telling us, I'd like to go to Target where I can buy everything all at once, or online retailers and like Amazon. Amazon has changed the game for a lot of us as far as like free shipping and things. People are very used to that now, and it's almost table stakes. So Gen Z gravitates towards small local retailers, and millennials appreciate the hunt for discount stores. So Gen Zs don't really care that much about the discounts. They like it, but it's not like a big driver. Whereas millennials say, you know what, I'm not brand loyal. I'll hunt for the best deal that I can possibly find. Brands' values also influence purchase decisions, and this is a new thing for us, and it's getting stronger and stronger again with all the generations, but especially those Gen Zers and millennials. They want brands that support the same social causes that they support. They want brands that have an environmental impact and are really cognizant of that, their footprint. They want brands that support diversity and inclusion. They want brands that are owned and founded by minority populations. They're actually paying attention to a lot of these things, as you will hear our friend here say. So we heard this again and again and again, that advertising and things really needed to reflect the person, and they needed to feel inclusive. Loyalty programs are becoming less important for connecting consumers to brands, especially for older generations. Younger generations want to earn rewards by doing different things. So maybe posting on social media or referring a friend or using partner brands. They want to get recognized for all those things. So loyalty programs, they're not going away by any means, but they are making a little bit of a shift. And you can see when we talked about loyalty programs, connect me to brands, all across every generation, those numbers were down from 2017. And they prefer loyalty reward programs that allow earning benefits from partner brands. So those partnerships, as we're looking at doing things like Marketplace, this is a real driver of that. And then getting rewarded for different activities besides just buying. So let's talk about spending and savings a little bit. We really wanted to look at which consumer behaviors would continue after the pandemic has eased up. So as the economy fluctuates, older generations feel less in control of their financial future. We asked, do you currently feel like you're in control of your financial situation? And you can see how pretty much everybody feels like they're somewhat in control anyway. But when we asked about future, that number really dropped for boomers and Gen Xers. People who have lived through recessions before are really, really a little bit worried about what's coming. Gen Zers and millennials didn't live through that, so they don't really understand, what a recession might do to their economic outlook. Consumers are really concerned about rising prices, especially generations that have experienced high inflation in the past. So you can see how that works out. Concerned about inflation, rising prices, especially for boomers and Gen Xers. They're in that 80% range, so almost all of them told us that they were concerned about that. Savings is a priority, and most generations intend to save more in the future. Now, you might be saying, well, of course they're going to say that, and that's very true. But so we asked not just about increase in savings, but we also wanted to know about, are you going to spend more on goods and products and experiences in the next 5 years? And you can see that Gen Zers are planning on doing all of that. There's percentage of more, and maybe a little bit less for boomers, especially in the goods and products. And that's to be expected because they're at a point in their life where they probably have all the stuff that they need. So experiences and savings become more important to them then. With a few exceptions, short-term goals are similar across generations, and that's really good news for Synchrony because the things that we are able to provide are the things that are important to the different generations, like saving for big purchases and improving credit scores, those sorts of things. So in contrast, we have solutions to many of these things. So for saving for big purchases, deferred interest and installment loans is something that can help them with that. For some of our other things, improving credit scores, we have, saving for emergencies, we have Care Credit, and we have our network cards, which really help have a safety net for those sorts of people. And then when we look at financial products, we wanted to know about how their behaviors and preferences have changed over time. And this is a change from 2017. So preference for paying with general purpose credit cards is up across all generations. You can see that bottom number there, up 15% overall, up 11% for Gen Zs, up 12% for millennials. So the credit industry is going strong still, and they really see the need for it. Some of the things that we also asked, like I typically avoid using credit cards for small purchases. We heard in the past that was pretty strong, and you can see those numbers are falling. So people aren't as adverse to credit for small purchases as they have been in the past. And then credit cards are more secure than debit cards. So Gen Z had originally told us that they really felt like credit cards weren't very secure and that debit cards were, or cash seemed like a better way to go for them. But you can see that's up 12 points from before. So they're getting the message about how to manage their finances and how to use credit responsibly. Younger generations have increased their ownership and use of general purpose cards. And this was a big thing when we first did this study. I was really concerned about because Gen Z especially said I'm not ever going to have a credit card. That's just not how I'm going to roll. Well, now you can see that about 41% of them have credit cards and 72% of them have debit cards, and that's up 15 points. So that's really significant. Usually you see a shift of maybe 1 or 2 points a year, and this one is up 15 from the last time we did it 4 years ago. Gen Z expects to increase their debit card use and digital payment vehicles. They're very digitally, they're digital natives, like I told you before. So they're used to using these things like Venmo and Cash App and Apple Pay and things that make it really easy for them to make payments. They don't have checks. I have 3 Gen Zers in my house and they literally don't even know how to use a check. My daughter had to do direct deposit and she's like, they're asking me for a check. I don't have that. She didn't know how even to get her account number and things. So we had a little lesson, that was good. But you just need to remember as you're going through and thinking about things is that this generation really doesn't understand all of the products and services that we might be offering them. So perception of debit cards as a way to stay debt-free is still really prevalent among Gen Zers and millennials. And a lot of this has to do with not understanding how financial services and financial products work. So they view debit cards as a way to stay debt-free. But as they start to get into a life stage where they understand that they're going to need some credit, they're becoming a little bit more credit savvy. But they get most of their information not from their parents, but from YouTube and things like that. So that's a little scary, but it's really important for us as Synchrony to be putting out educational messages to help them understand how to use credit responsibly. And while younger generations view credit cards as a tool for building credit, many admit they don't fully understand how they work. And that's a really scary thing. And that's why it's so important for us to really drive home those educational points. Ability to use financing is more important to younger generations and may account for the buy now, pay later appeal. So a lot of them do not have enough money at the time, but this is a way that they can get things. And that's why they think like Affirm and those sorts of things are so cool, because they allow them to pay over time and they don't really understand how they affect their credit score. So again, that education is really important for them. Buy now, pay later is growing and store card ownership is declining. This is something that's a little bit concerning, especially the store card part of it. But what we're finding is that in order to have a store card be enticing, then we really have to make sure that whatever it is that we're offering them is a good thing. So like immediate discounts on things might entice somebody to get a store credit card. And this is a boomer who's talking about his kids. Also, store credit cards is a perception of having a high interest rate and not being something that you want to get into. You can see those Gen Z quotes there. But we did find that if we gave them an immediate discount, they would be much more likely to engage with a store credit card, or if there was a reason for them. If it's a store they shop at a lot, then a reason for them to come back would be paramount to them getting a store card. Reward focus has increased for all generations, and the store credit card APR is getting more scrutiny from Gen Z. So beforehand, they didn't really pay much much attention to what the interest rates were, but we're finding that now they're really taking a good hard look at what those APR interest rates are and making decisions based on those. So you can see those numbers are up pretty much across the board. I generally don't pay attention to the interest rates on my store cards. Gen Z now is really paying attention to those sorts of things, but everybody is across the board, more so than they did in 2017. No annual fee and instant discount drive older generations to store cards. So having things like no annual fee, that's a really big deal to them. That immediate gratification thing, like I just told you about the 10% off first purchase, earning points to redeem for future purchases. All of those things are tangibles that might increase people to get store cards. Use of mobile wallets and peer-to-peer payments is up among all generations, so it's not going away. I talk a lot about buy now, pay laters with Synchrony, and I really want you guys to pay attention, because even though it's a very small percentage right now of people who are using those buy now, pay laters, they are coming for us in a big way, and people are getting much more used to using them. So we need to adapt and make sure that with set pay and those other things that we're introducing into the marketplace, it's really important to our consumers. So, and you can see that hardly any of them carry cash anymore. Cash is not a thing. They use mobile wallets, they use peer-to-peer payments. So we need to just stay on top of it all so that we're still relevant in this financial space. And even things like cryptocurrency use has increased across every single generation, even the boomers. So in 2017, it was almost nothing for the boomers and really low percentages for everybody else. But you can see in just that short period of time how much it's grown. There are even credit cards now that reward you in cryptocurrency. So it's important for everybody to understand how cryptocurrency works and to think about it as a long-term strategy. So just a quick little thing on Gen Z then and now, because this is a cool part of this presentation. After 4 years, Gen Z still prefers debit cards to credit cards. That's not going to change anytime soon, and a lot of that has to do with what their parents told them about credit, like I told you before, but they still feel that way, even though they've grown up a little bit. They do have begun to understand the importance of credit, but where they get that information from has changed quite a bit. So this is a generation that's very connected. They spend 8+ hours a day online, 5 hours a day on mobile devices, 3+ hours a day on laptops. They are budgeters. They have learned to use budgeting systems. They think building credit requires you to keep a balance on your credit card. That goes back to not understanding completely how things work. 30% of them have credit card debt, pretty small and much smaller than much more than it was when we first talked to them in 2017. They've become savvier and open to credit, but their desire to be debt-free is still a prevailing motivation. They realize the need for credit now to reach their long-term goals, but they're still not 100% sure how to use it responsibly. They continue to lean into their entrepreneurial spirit, and more than any other generation, they have ways of doing things. So passive income, it's very likely that a lot of Gen Zers will have 2 or 3 different jobs, and they could be things like, I'm a Grubhub deliverer, or I have a side hustle. That's a thing now. I think it's even in the dictionary. So they look at passive income sources. They're very entrepreneurial. They want to start their own businesses. They look for ways to pay down their student debt. So there's a thing called AmeriCorps, which helps pay down student loans with service. So if you do some service, then they help you with your debt. I've often said that Synchrony should come up with a product that, instead of giving you cash back, helps you towards your student loan debt, because that is the biggest thing, that they're coming out of school with a lot of debt. So even as they grow older, they're still not completely independent from their parents. So it's very likely that after college, instead of getting an apartment, you might move home. They're still on their health insurance. So they're still a big influencer into how their parents spend money, but they're also still dependent on their parents for many things. But they're also learners. So they're striving to be more financially literate and independent than the millennials were at this age. That's a different thing. That's just for the Gen Zers. They're seeking out information in all sorts of ways, YouTube and other ways. They're using Credit Karma and YouTube and social media to learn how to manage their money, which could be a good thing, or could be a bad thing, depending on what it is that they're looking at. They are investing in retirement at a much younger age than before. So how do we engage with Gen Z? 26% of them use social media to make a purchase, which is a pretty high number. But then look at this number. 72% are more likely to make a purchase from brands they follow on social media. So really important for Synchrony and its partners to have a social media presence. 75% of them interact with brands on Instagram, and 47% have made a purchase through this platform. So we cannot ignore social media in any way, shape, or form. And this is my favorite. 75% of TikTok users report their usage has increased since the start of the pandemic. But only 31% use to follow or interact with brands. I don't know if you guys saw or not, but Affirm did a collaboration with Rebel Wilson that was just absolute TikTok brilliance. It was like marketing magic. So if you haven't seen it, search it out, because it's really an interesting way to engage with this generation. So the needs of Gen Z are unique and more so than older generations. They avoid paying extra for convenience. They're not really into DoorDash and those sorts of things. They will be the ones delivering it, but they don't necessarily use it because they don't want to pay the extra. They really like access to perks. So things like free shipping or one-stop shops, automatic discounts, coupons, all those things, they're very immediate gratification. So they will be open to any perks like that. They believe that the buying experience is as important as the product itself. So the retailers must have a stellar and seamless online experience and reputation, and that experience needs to fold over into their brick and mortar stores. It needs to be seamless in order to create stickiness with this generation. They enjoy earning rewards points that can be used for discounts and savings, and the ability to earn rewards their own way. They want to get rewarded for things that they're already doing. If they share on social media about your brand, they want to be rewarded for that. So looking for ways that are a little bit different than maybe our normal val props to engage with this generation is paramount. Store credit card ownership is not appealing to them. So we have to do everything that we can to make it appealing. So simplifying the process, offering, alerts for payments due or withdrawal, anything that we can think of to make it a little bit more appealing to them, and overcoming that APR barrier that they see as something that's really keeping them from engaging with a lot of store credit cards. It's not something that we can't overcome. It's just we need to be a little bit creative in how we do it. So that is the end of the presentation. I welcome any questions or comments. I know this is a webinar, so if my contact information is on here. So if you would like to contact me, or if you have thoughts or want to dive a little bit deeper or have any questions, I am always happy to answer them. And thank you so very much for your time and attention on this matter. Thanks, you guys. Bye.
Sheila, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. Before we quickly hang up, the audience had a little trouble hearing the video, so I was wondering if you could just quickly recap the main summary from the female consumer in the first video, and then the gentleman who talked about his children in the second one.
Yes, I'm so sorry you couldn't hear them. The first one was talking about how important it is to her to have inclusivity in the brands that she uses. So she was talking about a makeup that she uses, and she uses it because they show people that look like her in their advertising. So that inclusivity is really important to her when she's picking brands to interact with. And it's just a message for Synchrony to make sure that we're being incredibly inclusive in our advertising and our representation as a business. And the second gentleman was talking about buy now, pay laters and why he thinks it appeals to a younger audience. He has children who use buy now, pay laters more than credit cards because they think they're building their credit with it, which is actually not true. So an area for us to be able to educate.
Wonderful. Sheila, thanks so much for that additional detail. And thanks all for tuning in. We appreciate Sheila for sharing her contact information and encourage anyone to reach out for further information.